Our welcome everyone. Our mission is in on the agenda. I won't read it again, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Vicky, who's going to give our SBAC update. Oh, and Vicky, you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm going to give a brief update from our February 26th and our March 12th meetings. We back on the 26th, we did a governor's update, and we heard about a block grant. And the block grant is a potential $3.8 million that we might get from the state. However, we're not counting it towards our budget now. However, that means that our total amount of cuts could be anywhere from 4.3 to 7.6 million. And we are planning on 3 scenarios, an ABC related to the different levels of potential cuts. And we need clarification on whether or not that'll be one-time grant funding or not. The other revenue that was given to the general fund was via P&O, our BSEP city tax. There's a ratio that the general fund provides, and it was 34-1, and BSEP provides the money that brings us down to 23-1, which is our class size. And we adjusted that ratio. So now the general fund is contributing 36-1 ratio. And so to offset that extra per 2 students, that's an additional about $1.3 million from BSEP that will go towards the general fund that will help us decrease that number. Finally, we were looking at our ADA, and there's a potential of 138 new students that we're now estimating, which could be around another $1.6 million. Some of the other things we discussed would be charging for transportation to parents about $1 a day, or if their student attends non-Berkeley after school programs, $2 a day. There was a discussion on whether or not we could do furlough days. A furlough would be like an unpaid day off, but we couldn't do that on instructional days. We recommend not doing it on professional development days. And so even though that's potentially like $820K if we did it for everyone, we're looking at only 12-month employees. And 12-month employees would give us an estimated of around $100K for one day of a furlough. So that's something that we're considering. All of these are considerations. We also briefly looked at contracts, which we're going to continue to revisit. And then at the last meeting, we reviewed some of these items again, and there is an additional amount of savings that through phase 1, the district has assessed, and that is about $1.2 million in various saving areas, but 750 of that is related to staffing, and the specifics of that staffing has not been disclosed yet, just due to confidentiality, but I'm hoping at Wednesday's meeting that might be discussed. The other thing we talked about was pink slips, which I know is going to come up at tonight's meeting. So the way that pink slips work is this year, 182 classified positions and 191 certificated positions received pink slips. Now, many of those positions will be rescinded. Any position that's based on soft money received a pink slip. So for example, all of the BSEP funded positions, because we haven't approved and finalized our proposals yet, or site funds, or Prop 28 money, or PTA monies, all of those positions receive pink slips. In addition, people who might be reallocated to a different position. So for example, if you have a TSA that's in a position that's being funded by soft money, but then that teacher technically has a job, is owed a job because of their union restrictions, and they might be moved to a different position, then that position might also need to be pink slipped. Also, for example, if you look at something like counselors and there's a potential cut of like 0.1 for counselors at each site, then even if we're not going to cut all of the counselors, all of those counselors would get pink slips. The same thing happens with OFI staff. So a lot of people who aren't necessarily losing their jobs receive pink slips. Part of the frustration, though, is I've heard a lot from parents on how to advocate, and potentially when those positions don't get rescinded quickly, we may lose people that we really like having in our district because they feel uncertain about their job. So even though we don't even intend to lay them off, because the money's not guaranteed, they get that pink slip and they might find another job. So hopefully tonight we're going to discuss that process a little bit more. The other thing that we talked about is there will be an increase for buses next year. So that's important for all your PTAs for field trips. And that's to right size the transportation costs. Transportation is often running in the black in comparison to other districts for what they spend on field trips. And so we're right sizing that. And so that may affect PTA funding for things like field trips because the bus costs will increase. But we also potentially discuss other ways of generating revenue or saving cost savings, things like subletting our space over the summer, re-looking at our after-school programs, potentially investing in those to expand them or change the cost of those, looking at consolidating the preschools or expanding them to longer day programs, or looking at things like whether or not we would want to close a small school like Oxford. None of those things are on the table. They're just ideas that came from various members of the group of things for us to explore. And the last thing that we looked at when we talked about contractors, there are several SPED, which is special education contracts that are significant, and specifically speech pathology group is 2 million. A lot of those positions are IAs, and we looked at the average cost for a district employee who's an IA, and that's around 43K. But a contractor through speech pathology or other contractors is a median cost of around 70K. So we're really hoping to discuss things like bringing those positions in-house and not using contractors. And it even came up potentially combining positions like after school employees with IAs so that we can fill all those openings we have in after school so we can take more students so we can generate more revenue. So we're exploring all of these different ideas and we'll continue discussing them at future meetings as we try to, balance our budget. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicki. That was awesome. Let's see here. I think now it is time for me to introduce our esteemed speaker of the night, Superintendent Ford-Morthel. So thank you so much for coming and being with us tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Rita, and thank you all for joining. Rita, I don't have sharing permission, so I'm going to ask if the host can give me sharing permission. And it's always hard to follow Vicki. I was just saying to someone, like, why am I even here? She pretty much covered the big nuggets, if you will. I appreciate you, Vicki, for always doing your role. One of the things we say about all of our advisory committees, we expect that our members are liaisons in the sense that they both bring information and feedback and questions and ideas from whatever constituency they represent. In this case, it would be the PTA, but Vicki is on a number of different advisory committees, P&O, et cetera, which is why I switched the A with the O. But also the other role of those liaisons or those members, if you will, is to bring information back. And so Vicki is pretty good at it. Rita's good at it too, but Vicki has been doing it for over 2 years now, or get year and a half. And so just always love to hear her do the recap. Let's see if I have sharing permissions now. I do. And then also, just want to make sure that folks know that I did put the entire deck in the chat. I won't be going over the entire deck, but I respect the fact that folks took time to send in a number of questions. So I'm going to go through some slides quicker than others, always bringing greetings on behalf of myself, but also our amazing Board of Education. And so Rita and I sent me a Google link, which is linked here, Google Doc, which is linked here, with a number of questions from, I believe, folks who might be in this room, but I think just parents in general, members of the PTA in general, and they were nice enough to bucket them for me. And so you will find that the majority of them are around budget, really understanding the budget, really also wanting to understand the March 15th notices, and wanting to understand why didn't our reductions from last year work. So I'm going to try to address some of those things as I go through some of the slides, but I'm happy throughout to kind of pause and hear questions that you all have specifically. There was also questions around federal funding and just what is our response if we lose the money, but also how are we responding to the executive orders that the president continues to seemingly write like throughout the night, and then our long-term planning. So as we think about budget and budget reductions, or what we like to say as budget balancing, how is our strategic plan informing those decisions? There were also two kind of big chunky questions about facilities. I may or may not get to those, but I did want to let you all know that towards the latter part of this slide deck, there is information around how we try to share and communicate information about facilities, as well as some updates specifically for Longfellow with the workforce housing, as that was one of the bulleted concerns here on this slide. There were also questions around curriculum. I'm actually not addressing those tonight, nor are they in my slide deck, because I understand the Director Albeck will be coming to an upcoming meeting to provide those updates for you all. And similarly, there was a number of questions around the after-school programming. You will also find that there's not specific slides that address that, but we are trying to work to see if we could have someone come to answer those questions from you all, but also want you all to know that we do have folks from this group who make up the PTA collaborative that's working on the after school program, working with our lead to try to address some of the very questions that you are asking or the issues that you are posing. Also, our 2x2, which is a partnership meeting between 2 board directors from BUSD and 2 city council members, is a place where after school programming has been a topic. It was a topic last year, and it's going to be a topic again this year, as we know that neither the city nor BUSD has enough capacity for all of the demand and need for after school care. And so it just makes sense that we partner and collaborate. So the 2x2 is another great place. There's another place where those conversations are happening. So wanted you to know about that. And then we also, again, work really closely with the city to figure out how we can respond to the needs of so many families for after school care. And so again, I may not answer each question specifically, but it was those questions in mind that kind of informed how I created the slide deck and the flow of the slide deck itself. And then again, happy to stop throughout to answer any questions. So first question, or the chunk of the first set of questions, was around budget and the budgeting process that BUSD is going through. I want to remind you all, some of you all were not in the space, but on October 28th, I came to the PTA and provided an initial update. And so that presentation deck is also linked to this slide. But in general, I think what's important for folks to know is that we are always kind of building the ship as we sail it, in the sense that we are always finalizing one budget as we're prepping for another budget. And so currently we're in the March stage, where we are really looking at giving our board updates to with regard to our current budget. So actually on last board meeting Wednesday, Pauline and Emily made a presentation to the board about our second interim budget, which is really looking at current revenues, current expenses. Are we where we thought we were going to be, and what we need to do differently, or where might we see gaps or holes or needs? At the same time that that's happening, we're waiting for information from the state to figure out what we need to do and what we will have next year and in the years to come budget wise, while also trying to make some plans for next year's budget. And Vicki kind of alluded to that. She mentioned a grant that was supposed to come to us, or that might come to us. And typically at this point of the year, you'll be pretty clear, have a good idea rather, of what the governor's funding is going to be. But this is a very unusual time that we're in for lots of reasons. And so we find ourselves in March still not clear on what we're going to be getting from the state. If you look at this cycle, you'll notice that in January is when we actually start to have a sense of what the governor is thinking with regard to the budget. It's typically the time where the budget is proposed from the governor. School districts go to a big convening and get that information and start to try to make some preliminary plans based on that. And then we get more information, but typically January, we get the majority of it. We start our budgeting process. And then in May, it's something called the May revise, and we get an updated budget from the governor. So all the way from January to May, though districts are doing a lot of planning and decision making, those decisions are really based on a soft idea of what the money will be that's not confirmed until May. And so I want to make sure that you're clear on that cycle. And that is why it's not until June typically, or late May, that the Board of Education approves our budget. And that's important for you to know when I talk about the March 15th notices a little bit later on. Again, this year is different in that typically around this time of March, we're pretty clear. Are we getting that $3 million grant or not? Right now, as Vicki said, we're not sure. And in fact, Vicki, when you come to the SBAC on Wednesday, you're going to get an update. And that update is that we've been told we're likely not going to get that entire $3 million. And so this is why we don't make decisions, and we didn't change our target based on someone saying you might be getting $3 million. We have to keep our target at what it is based on the information we know at the time when we set it. And so with that, I wanted to just quickly recap that we did $7.9 million in board approved budget balancing last year. 5.5 of that was ongoing and 2.4 million of that was one time. The goal and the target was for 7.9 ongoing. We weren't able to do that. It was a pretty heavy lift to do 7.9 period and to do 5.5 ongoing. So we came into this school year knowing that we had to find another 2.4 million ongoing to reduce our budget by. There was a question that stood out to me, or a comment that stood out to me in those lists of questions that basically kind of said that the budget balancing didn't work last year. So why do we think it's going to work this year? And I want to just correct that. That is not that it didn't work. It actually did work. We did a really good job of balancing our budget by $7.9 million in ways that, quite honestly, and I say this with all due respect to anyone who might have lost their role or had a service decrease, and we did that without folks really feeling it. And I say that because I've been in districts where we've had cuts and we're like, oh my gosh, I no longer have an X, or I no longer have this service. The vast majority of Berkeley families, the vast majority of Berkeley schools have been able to continue their business despite that 7.9. What we said at the end of last year after making these reductions was that it was going to be very, very unlikely that should we have to make another set of reductions, we'd be able to do it in the same way, that it would not be felt. In fact, I remember saying and have said over and over, we're going to feel this one. And we are feeling this one. And so we are not the only ones feeling it, just so you all know. For a number of reasons, these next set of reductions are happening in Berkeley and other places. One, we saw the sunsetting of federal COVID funds. You might remember that during the COVID days and even afterwards, the government was giving us a lot of money for learning recovery, mental health, et cetera. And those dollars have dried up. We also have some districts that are seeing declining enrollment. In our case, the government was also giving us grace in terms of how they funded our average daily attendance. We make our money by students coming to school. That's one way we make the money, and by our enrollment. They were giving districts money based on a earlier kind of pre-COVID number. And they gave us grace after COVID, and they said, we're going to keep funding you on that number. But that grace has run out. And so they're saying, now we're going to fund you for exactly what you have. And we didn't have a sharp decline, but like every other district, we lost students during COVID. So that's another reason why we're seeing some reductions in our revenues. Also, there's just been persistent inflation, and there's just an increasing cost of labor across all districts. So I want to be clear that we are facing these reductions, not because the reductions last year didn't work, not at all because of that, but because we have seen a significant reduction in our revenues. And like any other budget, we need revenues to be able to afford and handle our various expenses. And I want you to know that this, again, is not just Berkeley. This is every single district in Alameda County and most every district in the state of California, particularly those of our size or larger. Sorry, I'm not sure why it's not clicking. So with that in mind, looking at our expenses and looking at our revenues, we need to keep a healthy reserve, y'all. We have to have money so that in case, the sky falls or something happens, we can pay folks. So there's a required reserve of 3%. We try to keep above 3%. And when our fiscal team gets together, they think about what do we need to have in our bank, if you will, to be able to cover expenses and costs should there be some type of catastrophe, right? And that's not even something to take lightly anymore anyway. So we need to make sure we can pay folks. And typically Berkeley has had a really healthy reserve, but over the last several years, not even the last 3 years, the last several years, we've been making a lot of decisions that were not sustainable, that meant that we were taking on expenses that were more than we were getting in. And we were dipping into our reserve or using some of our other funds. And so in order for us to balance that, in order for us to be compliant with what's required by law for us to have put away, we have a new budget target of 7.6, 7.8 ongoing. Again, it wasn't because of anything that didn't work last year. It's just the realities of where we are fiscally in our state and quite honestly, in our nation right now. And so Vicki talked to you about the SBAC, and that's the Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee. And that is a group that's been around pre-me. So I want to say at least for 6 or so years, where we bring folks, we have labor partners, we have folks from different advisory groups, and we have staff who come together and try to figure out what are we going to do to move towards that target. I want to be clear that typically during budget reduction time, folks go straight to reductions. What are you going to cut? And we are definitely talking about what we might reduce or change, but we're also talking about how can we bring more revenue into the district, which is why you heard Vicki talk about the bus fares and things like that. So I want you to hold that we are trying to do the both and as we move towards the 7.8. What's also important, as we show this slide at every SBAC, is that this is not an easy discussion or set of decisions that we're making here when we think about these reductions, but we recognize that there are no solutions, there's only trade-offs. So for every decision that we make, we have to ask, what is the trade-off for that? For everything we want to keep doing, we have to ask, what might we do differently or do less of? What might we stop doing? And so this is going to always be a time of the year, particularly when you have to make such significant reductions where folks are all going to rally for what's most important to them or what they think is the most valuable. And our job as SBAC is to hold the district's mission, to hold the district's priorities, and make decisions that ultimately make sure that we're able to make good on all the promises that we've made to our students and families, even if we do it in a different way. So with that in mind, we have some core values of resource allocation that you'll see on the left-hand side of your screen. And those are the things that we kind of evaluate our decisions or even our conversations against. Are we keeping equity in mind when we're thinking about reducing a program? Are we transparent? Do folks know what's happening? And so I'm here today in the spirit of that value of transparency. Are we making decisions that are sustainable? So again, some of our past decisions over the last several years, how we used our COVID dollars, et cetera, put us in a position where we couldn't sustain it once those dollars expired, right? And are we making sure that we're not destabilizing schools? And I know a lot of you are feeling like this March 15th notices are destabilizing schools, so we're going to talk about that soon. But the idea is to maintain some level of stability as we make some really hard decisions. On the right hand of the screen, you are going to see our strategies that we employ as we move to get towards that 7.8 target. And these are not in a particular order, except that typically the line on the top, which is evaluate and remove vacant positions, is the first thing that most districts do. And that actually was the first thing that Berkeley did last year and the first thing we're doing this year. The very last thing you see, and I want to be clear, the very last thing you see that is in order is consolidate and reduce positions and programming. We are going to have that conversation because about 80% of our entire budget is the people, their benefits, their retirement, their salaries, right? So again, there's no way that we can do this again without us feeling it. And we love all of our people, so we are feeling it. But that's the very last line that we want to address. In between that is some of those things you heard Vicki talk about, and those are those 5 strategies there. We are looking at how can we eliminate expenses that are covered in other funding sources? How are we identifying inefficiencies? Do we have programs that duplicate them? They're doing the same thing and we're paying folks twice. Do we have inefficiencies where we're paying, for a service that's supposed to serve 100 kids, but is only serving 50 kids? Do we have more contracts than we need? So all those questions that folks are asking either in the board meetings or even here, we're asking at SBAC, and we're trying to exhaust all the other possibilities before we get to that last blue line, which is consolidate and reduce positions and programming. Just really quickly, if folks are trying to understand, like, well, how does the SBAC arrive at decisions? It's a lot of conversations and it's a lot of kind of questions and asking for data and playing things out and going back and trying again. You heard Vicki talk about some things that were proposed. Those are just proposals. Nothing's been voted on or approved yet. Because our job at SBAC is to first explore all the possible reductions and the possible options, and then think about which of those are actually viable. Right? I can't say we're going to cut all the principals, like that's not viable, right? Or we can't say we're not going to have EOD because the law says we have to have it. And so we try out things, people come up with suggestions and we bring back information about them, but we're going to do a lot of whittling down before we come up with our final set of proposals that then go to the board for the board to vote on. The way it works is that SBAC makes recommendations to me, and with me, I create a budget and put forth that budget to my board, and then ultimately my board has a decision to vote for all or parts of that budget, which again is why that June deadline is the deadline. Any questions about that so far? Okay. So we have not been just twiddling our thumbs. We started meeting for SBAC early in October, which is early for most schools and actually early for us. But we anticipated that we would have to, one, find that other 2.2 million that we didn't make ongoing last year, but two, something in the air. So we were already preparing ourselves to start to have some hard decisions. So one of the first things that my department and teams have been doing is reviewing their own budgets, reviewing staffing allocations, and us just looking at our internal protocols to see where there might be some inefficiencies or some cost savings. I believe Vicki mentioned that towards that $7.8 million worth of reductions, we've already identified about $4 million. And those $4 million come from various of the strategies. You will see that we have about 369 coming from just removing and evaluating our positions that are vacant. We found about 1.1 to true up some program costs. We also, the 762 that Vicki referenced, where we did not tell positions yet, we will be sharing those in an upcoming SBAC. And we also identify about $1.6 million in revenues. So we're not done. And this is without all those folks on the March 15th notices being released. So I'm gonna be clear about that, and I'll get to that in a minute. But this shows you the work that this group has been doing. $4 million towards a $7.8 million reduction is really remarkable. And like Vicki said, had we received that $3 million from the state, we would be almost done, right? We could apply that 3 and we'll be 7 million towards 7.8. But that's not how it's going to happen. And so this is why we use the data that we have to make some decisions or to inform some of our recommendations. So really quickly, Vicki mentioned this already. Again, Vicki, we should coordinate. So Vicki already talked about just some of the ideas that have come forth. I do want to make sure this is clear because folks like to take one slide and run with it, and that is very detrimental to some of our school communities. We have received some ideas that we are exploring. None of this is official. These are all things explored, and Vicki mentioned some of them, like the furlough days, consolidating some of our preschools, also charging for the bus, et cetera. If you have a proposal that you would like us to explore, if you have some ideas of how the district can save some costs or how we can generate some revenue, both Rita and Vicki are on the SBAC, and I would suggest that you share those through them and they can bring them forward. You could also just email me too, and I can share it with the group. One person asked about our goals and how we're making sure that the strategic plan and our other goals align to our budget decisions. And I would say always, always, always. Our strategic plan is still being developed, but our pillars in the strat plan, which are on the right side of the screen, align to our LCAP goals, which are consistent with our theory of change or improvement in the district, things that we know is important to do turnaround, if you will, or to improve outcomes for our students. And so we're always thinking about what did we say we're going to do and what do we say we're going to prioritize, and think about how do we not make budget decisions that are contrary to those things. Again, I will say that it's not so much the how, it's the what. And so when we talk about providing high quality instruction, Rita might have a way to do it, and Di might have a way to do it, and Vicki might have a way to do it. We're going to do it. We have to figure out which of those ways to do it are the ones that are most efficient and that fit within the parameters of our budget constraints at this time. And so some folks get worried, like, are we going to stop doing X? We intend to continue to do family engagement, to continue to do interventions. We might have to rethink how we do those things. And I stress the word might in that statement. So that was it for the budget recap. I want to know one more time, any questions about that? Because the other question that was asked was around your president and the executive orders.
Do we want to touch on pink slips a little bit more? Because
I think I can skip this and go to pink slips.
No, let's do this first.
Okay. So this one's going to be quick. Again, executive orders are coming out like McDonald's orders, I don't know. And there's a lot of anxiety. Just wanted to let you all know, if you haven't seen them, we've been trying to send out communications since November in anticipation of the new leadership, and just reminding folks and reiterating our values as Berkeley, the ways in which we celebrate our diversity and we'll continue to be an inclusive and equity focused district. And so we have information about our undocumented students and families and how we support them, that everyone is welcome, et cetera. So if you haven't seen those, please look on our website, because we wanted to counter narratives to let folks know that we are not going to drop Berkeley values, even though some other places are dropping or changing their values or what their focus are. Really quickly, someone also asked about LGBTQ plus in particular. So one of those communications talked about LGBTQ plus. We have one coming out actually by the end of this week that's going to go a little bit deeper in that, but also want to let you know that we have an advisory committee for our gender equity, sexual harm advisory committee is what it's called, GSHAC. And that group also had conversations with me, as well as a video that reiterated that focus. And so just want to let you know, we talk about and share our values from with different groups, as well as widely in the community. With regard to funding in particular and the executive orders that are coming out about you have 14 days to stop this or you'll lose funding. We have consulted legal advice, as well as School Services of California. They are lobbyists, as well as a number of lawyers who support California schools and school districts. And they continue to tell us to stay the course. And they also continue to tell us to assume that our funds will continue. An executive order does not stop funding, you all. It takes a lot more than that. It takes acts of Congress. Even executive orders themselves are not law.
Hey, where's the wait, Ryder, where's the that triangle looking rod?
Can't get on.
Kiki and Ryder,
we gotta
push mute.
Sorry.
It's okay. And so Rob Bonta, our Attorney General, and some others have been filing lawsuits, et cetera. There's actually a collective of different states who've been filing some lawsuits. And so 2% of our funding, about 2% of our funding is federal funding. And we don't want to sneeze at that as we move into $7.8 million of reductions, but we're happy that it's not that significant of an amount of our budget. But we are continuing to assume that those dollars are coming, and they have been coming. Until we hear otherwise, we plan for such. We do have Yasmina here, who is from our Office of Civil Rights, in case folks have any specific questions, either about the executive order targeting specific groups or about the executive order and funds. Rita, I only can see 4 people on the screen, so if you see any hands, let me know.
And we've got 28 people here, so we've got a good bunch of us today.
No hands, Rita, we're good?
I think we're good.
Okay, Yasmina, you can still stick around. So we're moving to the pink slips, as you all call them, March 15th notices. So I want to remind you all, we started off about the budget and talked about the budget cycle, how it's not until June that the budget is approved, not until May that we're really clear of what the governor is going to give us, and January is where we typically start to build our budget. That process has been a process for forever, but it is inconsistent with some of the other processes in the district. But probably more importantly than that, we cannot have our employees wait until May for the governor to say, this is what I'm going to really give you, nor wait until June for our board to approve our recommended budget to tell them if they have a role or not, to tell them if they're going to be 1.0 or 0.8 or 0.5. So to protect employees, and I know it doesn't feel that way, but to protect employees, there's law that says in education, we have to notify employees no later than March 15th if there's any discussion or any possibility that they might have their positions reduced or completely eliminated. For forever, and I'm an old person, I've been in education for 20-something years, so that's why I say forever, the pink slips were going to certificated staff, meaning that law was for certificated folks. Classified staff had a much shorter window of notification. I think it was a year or 2 years ago, the law kicked in to say that the classified people also need to be noticed in advance. And so March 15th notices now go out to classified and certificated. There was a question earlier about, should we protest? Should we rally? I won't answer that for you. What I will say to you is that I know some folks personally who are, for example, in the Department of Education or who are in Office of Civil Rights, right? And they got a notice that said, clear out your offices in a week or 2 weeks. I also know folks like you do who work just in regular industries, right? And you get a typical 2 weeks notice, maybe to be nice, 30 days. And so from my perspective as an educator, not as a superintendent, this is a protection for us, for the educators, so that they have advance enough notice to make other decisions should they choose to. I'm not saying it's a pleasant experience. I'm not saying it's a good experience at all, actually. I would prefer not to pink slip anyone, but given that we have to make the cuts that we make, I think it is the most respectful decision to let folks know, hey, heads up, there's a chance that your position might have to change in some way. Our goal, by law, we have to tell them before May 15th, the final decision. But even that feels like a long time. March 15th was my birthday, actually. So it wasn't even that long ago. We're now in March 24th, right? So we're 7 days into those notices, and it feels like it's been forever, but it's been 7 days since folks have been noticed, and 7 days that we've been really working hard to figure out already which ones can we rescind and which ones are for sure. And so I know folks are like, well, when are they going to let them know? It's been 7 days. And we're trying our best to get information that's solid information that can inform if we can rescind those or not. But by law, we actually have until May 15th to give them the final information about their positions. I think Vicki talked about this just a little bit, but I want to make sure that folks are clear about what the different types of notices are. So let's start on the right-hand side. I shared with you that now by law, classified staff have to get the notices on by the 15th as well. Before that, it was a much shorter window. And classifieds are pretty simple. Everyone who's classified who got a notice is either because of lack of work or lack of funds. In this case, it's lack of funds. And they have to have their final notice again by May 14th. That one's pretty cut and dry. What's not so cut and dry, and Vicki gave you the numbers, a little bit over 166, I believe, for the classified. And Vicki, I think yours is a little bit higher, so you might have more current data, as I was not the last SBAC. Sorry, for the certificated side, which is the left side, these notices are not just about layoff. There's all different types of March 15th notices. There are reassignment notices. And so some teachers or some certificated staff got the notice because they're going to be reassigned to a different school, to a slightly different role. This actually, you guys, was the vast majority of certificated notices. Reassignment. You still have a job, you just might not be at the same place. And we know that place matters because we're all small communities within our big community. But I want to clarify that because I think there's some confusion that all these teachers are going to not have a job. A good majority of these folks got a notice to be reassigned. The other group for certificated March 15th notices are temporary releases. And those are certificated staff who are on contract. And they knew when they were hired that their contract was going to end at a certain date. In our case, it ends at the end of the school year for the majority of them, but they still have to get that March 15th notice, even if their contract let them know that they were going to be ending June 1st, let's say. The other group is the probationary non-reelection. And those are folks who are first and second year teachers. And this is typical of districts in general. You are not tenured until after your second year when you become no longer a Probe 2. And the final ones are layoffs. About 22, and now I'm having a hard time seeing my screen. About 22 of the folks who are certificated who got these notices are actually layoffs. So as you're worried about my teacher is going to be gone, the vast majority may, that word is important, be reassigned. Very unlikely, as Vicki said. We have no intentions of releasing or even reassigning most of the folks that we put on that list. What it allows us to do is allows us to then to better understand our budget so that we can then make some decisions in ways that are responsible. Vicki already told you that who gets the notice, aside from the criteria I just gave you on the previous slide, are folks who are on soft dollars. You all, if you haven't approved your PTA budget, it wouldn't be fair for me to tell Yasmina, yes, you have a job, and I don't know what decisions you all are going to make. You might actually say, we don't need that interventionist for 5 days a week anymore. We only need that person 3 days a week. So we have to say we're going to wait until certain things are finalized before we let them know if they have a position. So those soft dollars are important for you to understand. A lot of them are your soft dollars. We also have some grants that are expiring. The federal government or the state government said you have this grant for 3 years. It sunsets, June of 2025. I cannot guarantee a position if I know the money's going to run out. And so soft funding is a big reason why a lot of people got these notices, aside from the categories on the other side. And then when we're doing this, sometimes it's one person. Sometimes it's a whole classification. And that is because there's all these little details and nuances for education, right? It's seniority, it is what type of credential you hold, and a number of other factors. So we can't always pinpoint it's gonna be Yasmina. We might have to say it's gonna be everyone who has blonde hair like Yasmina, and then we have to figure out, who started first, who started second, what credentials they have to get to the final decision. Rita, I see your hand.
Yeah, is that where soda tax money fits in? Because I mean, that was one of the things, I don't remember, I don't think it came from SBAC, but that there has been less people drinking soda because the soda tax worked.
We
And
have
so,
definitely seen less in soda tax. I don't know that we've attached it to salaries. I would have to write that down or have Yasmina write that down, and I can come back to SBAC and give you the answer of how we've used our soda tax funds and what's the reduction of it. How's that impacted our budget overall?
but that would fall under soft funding
No,
also?
that's
Oh.
ongoing. It's just unreliable, but it's not soft.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, because the purpose of it doesn't change, right? And
Okay.
and it doesn't have an expiration date. It's just more, it's unlike, it's not soft funding, it's just the revenue is not, the revenue stream is not as
Defined or concrete, maybe?
no, it's just not as reliable or consistent, to say that
Okay.
way. So a couple of things about the notices. Again, it allows us the flexibility to restructure also. I think I said earlier, we're going to still do the thing. My analogy has been, I'm not sure if it's a good one. I have to go to work every day. And maybe when money was good and revenues were plentiful, I took a Lyft or a limousine to work every day, right? When my money situation changed a bit, I still have to go to work every day. But now I might carpool, I might take the bus. Me getting to work is still going to happen. Making sure we have interventions for our students are still going to happen. Our after school program is still going to happen, right? Though all the things that we say we believe in and we value are still going to happen. Our charge right now with tight constraints is to figure out how it can happen, being ready and open to it happening differently. So one group that comes up a lot is like, oh, you noticed 10 OFI people. What do you mean we're not going to have family engagement? I just told you the criteria of who gets noticed. I also let you know that we don't intend to even release the majority of folks that we've noticed, but we will still have family engagement because we value engagement and particularly family engagement. But we might say we can't do it with 10 anymore. We have to do it with 8. Or we might say we're going to make a central position and do it this way. There's a number of ways that you can engage families and actually support family engagement than the current model that we have. And so I also want you just to walk away with, even if there's something on people who are on the pink slip note list, as you all call it, the March 15th notice, that you're like, wait a minute, all the counselors, we cannot run a district without counseling, or wait a minute, the 504. And so it's not that that thing will go away. It just, again, gives us some flexibility to think about how we still do that thing. I also want to stress that no decisions have been made. People had to get noticed by law because it would be disrespectful to wait until the budget is done or even close to being done, which is not until May, to let them know, hey, Hollis, you might not be full-time anymore. No decisions have been made. SBAC will be voting on some of the recommendations at the next meeting, and we'll vote on more and more towards that 7.8 over time. But even after SBAC has voted, y'all, and I put it in my budget, remember that my board has the final decision about what we do and what we don't do. And
there's a few questions in the chat.
okay, let's do it.
Okay. What happens if a lunch duty person is dismissed? Do teachers have to do lunch duty? I'm not sure that's even a question for us necessarily. That might be a school site committee question, but I don't know.
So teachers do not have lunch duty in their job. You know, our teachers have duty-free time. And so if lunch duty monitors, the school service assistants, I believe is what they were called technically, are reduced or removed, which again is very unlikely, it would be on us in partnership with the school leaders to figure out how to supervise lunch. But think about it, like it's very unlikely that we're going to reduce all the lunch duty folks. But we might say it's going to look slightly different. Principals, you have to be out there too, and you only have one person with you as opposed to 2 people with you. So I don't, again, don't walk away as if any decisions have been made about any structure or any staffing of anything, because none have been made. If something's on the table, it's because we want to give folks a chance to explore that particular option. Other question, Rita?
Yeah, next one. Who can we complain to or petition about the budget cuts? The California government?
You can always write to our government, and I need to get an address for you to send it to. You can say to Newsom, we need more money in education. I will let you all know that when we went in January to get the governor's budget, it was actually like, oh, good news. And the good news was not that they were going to get more money, but that there weren't going to be any cuts. To be really honest with you all, the LA fires really impacted California's budget significantly. And so that has impacted, you know, now, as they understand it more, LA was big, and LA's big tax revenue. LA has tons of businesses, right? So there's all these fiscal implications of it all. So all that to say, and I'm from LA, so I'm a little biased. I kind of understand the tragedy, if you will, or the crisis that led to this crazy budget, and the fact that we still don't know much in March. But you can definitely write to the governor, and I'll get you that information. Advocating for more dollars for education is something that we've been needing to do and have been doing for decades now, because we are one of the lowest funded states in the country. But Yasmina,
I think that might be.
Mhm.
Is that a how do we change Prop 13 issue also? I mean, like, I don't know, like, where do we start? That was when that started, right? Is the decrease in funds for California public schools. That was in the 80s, 70s.
That
Um,
a lot more. Is
my
that
hope,
more?
yeah. But my hope actually is also to who do we petition about changing the process? I mean, again, I agree that if you potentially could get laid off, having extra or have a job change, having notifications about that would be valuable. But I'm wondering if there's a way to budget farther in advance so that the process shifts so that we know these things more in advance. And I don't know, I see find your representative there from Lindsay. So maybe that's the call on that as well.
Yeah, that was a tricky one, Rita, only because, just to be honest, we don't budget year by year. We budget for 3 years.
Right.
We do a multi-year cycle, right? The thing is, though, if
Newsom doesn't, though.
Right, so that part, I was going to say, so we are like anticipating something, right? When we do it, and then we have to wait to see what he says. I'm thinking like maybe to request or advocate for the budget timeline of the state to be moved up, but I don't know
That's what I was
how
thinking.
likely that is. That's what we wait on.
Right, but that's affected by taxes and things, so I don't know. But anyway, that
Now
might be.
LA is going to get a break, and they're not a break, but they're taking file much later, which is something else that's impacting him knowing what the document looks like.
Are all the schools in the district being affected equally, or are some schools getting targeted more than others?
Are we talking about the March 15th notices or budget?
That's a good question. Is it Venata? Would you like to jump in and ask?
Sure. I was just wondering how, it was the March 15th notices. Like, are the layoffs like uniform, or is it some schools being affected more?
Thank you. So the layoff notices are not given out by school at all. They're given out by positions. So in that way, it is I guess equitable, if that's the right word. And that way there's not going to be a school that's like, oh, you are the most impacted, because we're not even thinking about schools when we're making the list. We're looking at, again, a number of factors, and then groups of positions oftentimes. So like it's counselors, period, for example, or assistant principals, period, for example, or OFI in general. And so most of those positions cross multiple sites. There's likely some cases where, some sites don't have a particular position, but it's very rare in Berkeley. It's more common in other places. And they might feel it more, but no, it's pretty general, if you will. And we work really closely, just so y'all know, we work with our principals too around this. So when we do get to decision making about lunch duty, et cetera, we're not doing this in a vacuum. In addition to doing with SBAC, we're sitting with principals talking about each position and what they do and what the school's needs are to inform the final decisions for their school.
Next one here is, are LEARN's funds included in the budget, like payments from parents for their students?
Yeah, so I'm gonna hold that one for when our person comes to give you an update, because our LEARN's fund is actually informed by a couple of different funding sources, not our general fund. It's actually it's a grant. It actually tells us who we can serve and what it's supposed to look like, and any revenues from that are supposed to go to those same student populations. Berkeley needs to clean up how we do it. That said, if we charge our folks there's ways that the general fund kind of fills gaps or holes, if you will, in funding for the after school program. And what we know is that we have not raised our fees for those families who do pay in some time. And so one of the things that the PTA Collaborative has suggested is an increase in fees. So that can be considered to increase the revenues. But I don't want to confuse you to make you think that all the money that would go to LEARN's or the after school program would help towards that 7.8 target, because it has its own special funding source to serve a special group of students. Are you calling names, Rita? Because I see Hollis's hand.
Yeah, I think Hollis is up. I think the other two people, Hollis actually was one of the people, but I think the other two comments here are just resources. So much appreciated for the resources. Hollis, you're up.
Yeah, I just put a resource in and people are asking who to contact. I put in the link to Buffy Wicks, our assembly person for Berkeley, and also our former mayor, Jesse Ardoin, who was at the Roots game. So that's interesting. Reach out to him if you need some help in getting legislation passed. One question I have, Director Ford, is I think a bugaboo of mine is just how we fill out paperwork when kids transition from site to site. We have to fill out all these forms, just the same information that's in Infinite Campus. I'm thinking, is there a way to look at all this process? Because I think there's a big administrative load that the district has in collecting this information over and over again. We've already told you that's in the systems. Like, from sending in paperwork via email or fax, for you to look at information that's already in your system, it's already known to you. I think there's some cost savings that we can figure out in terms of not asking parents for forms over and over and over again.
Cost savings and people's energy and time and sanity. Yasmina is smiling. Yasmina, you want to say something? Yeah, so Yasmina, in addition to her being Office of Civil Rights for Berkeley, she also is our chair, if you will, for our policy subcommittee in the district. And some of that you're talking about, Hollis, is not just about us changing our practices. It's aligning our policies to inform how we do enrollment and transfers and transitions differently. Yasmina, you want to say something?
Yeah, Hollis, that is definitely one of my favorite things to try to fix in this district, especially when I learned that, parents submit birth certificates of their children over and over and over again. It's one child, one birth certificate, especially if there aren't any changes, right? So we actually updated our admissions policy last year to sort of minimize. So we took out, so anytime when there's a school change and because of the lottery, right, you would have to submit new paperwork so that you could go to the lottery, but not your birth certificates and not all the things that we have, just to verify your residence in Berkeley, because people move. And then we cut that out, or most of the resident stuff, for Berkeley High, because all the kids, you don't have to do a preference because all the kids are going to Berkeley High. Where else would they go? But that doesn't mean that the process still cannot be tightened, that the number of forms cannot be decreased, and that also the burden is not annual, especially if you have multiple children in the district. It may feel like every year you're submitting packets and packets of paperwork that you have already submitted to us.
Yeah,
So
no, I just went through that when our principal was like, fill in the forms. I'm like, here's a printout for Infinite Campus. Nothing has changed. I said, fill it out again.
Screenshot,
Okay.
right.
And that's great. I encourage, don't tell Francisco, but I encourage that.
And that is an example of how, so one, yes, we're working on that. We've done some work, but we have more work to do. But it is also an example of us and the work we're trying to do to identify inefficiencies, because to your point, inefficiencies in practice or protocols, right, can lead to unnecessary costs. And so thank you for that example, but also know that we're working on that one. I don't know that we'll see any cost savings from any changes in the upcoming school year, but we hope to see not just cost savings, but people, again, sanity.
It could be a whole FTE you get rid of instead of having to type that stuff over again, but I'll leave it. But you're working on it, so that's good enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hollis. Good to see you. Emily?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a bigger strategic question, but as a PTA president, I just want to note that the PTAs hold, like, who are all volunteers, right, and who are all trying to understand this themselves, right? We hold so much of fundraising for our schools, right, and contributing in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to our schools to fund these positions, and it's a lot to put on parents. And I hope that as we move forward, I know that we're in a crisis mode right now, that there can be some thought to figuring out ways in which, like, an individual parent is not, like, does not have the weight of funding people's jobs, right? And so, like, as PTA president, like, the most common question I've gotten in the last week is like, how can the PTA cover all of these positions? And, like, I mean, we can't. And it's frankly crazy that, like, we're even having that conversation. And so
Also,
I just think that,
but also,
I think that
Emily,
there should be, sorry.
we don't have to. I mean, I think, well, one of the things that I think is helpful to keep in mind is that we also don't have to. Like, 350 positions aren't actually evaporating. right? And so I feel like
we
part of the role.
Yeah, but we still do. I mean, at Rosa Parks, we fund positions every year. I think my point is just like, I'm also wondering if there's a larger conversation that could be had for the future about like more coordinated efforts between school sites and PTA fundraising, and how like these huge, enormous fundraising efforts could be put to a more collaborated and coordinated effort across school sites, so that we could be thinking about some of these issues and this fundraising for our school district more holistically and not school by school. And I have no answers, but I just want to like throw that out there for the future.
Yes. And Emily, just to let you know, 2 years ago when I started meeting with this group, I think Tsung was the BPTA president, and those were the conversations we were starting to have, just really trying to think about how PTA's fundraising can be one, not side by side, but it was, do we want to put in one big pool? Like different districts do it different ways, but also how are we aligning to make sure that some PTAs are not carrying loads, let's say, that other PTAs not. And then there's still the equity issue that all PTAs don't raise the same amount of money, right? So that in itself has some equity dilemmas embedded. I will say, and that kind of paused, because then it was like $7.2 million reductions. The other thing we've been talking about that we haven't gotten to the final answer to, Emily, is that the reality of it is that PTAs really shouldn't fund. You should be supplementing, not supplanting, right? So you shouldn't be funding like core positions. So one of our works, as we were thinking about organizational clarity, was like getting really clear, like what is the base? What is something that every school is going to get because the district funds it, or because it's just what you, right? And then what are the above and beyonds, if you will, the little new, oh, we want our school to have X that PTAs could do. We did not and have not finished the conversation, but I just wanted to, and that's not necessarily making you happy, but I at least wanted to let you know that you're not crazy. Like those are the things that we've been talking about. And we came, I was like, what do you mean PTA pays for whatever? Because if you think about those core values of resource allocation, sustainability is one of the core ones, right? And you all are very reliable, particularly in Berkeley, but it's just not good practice for PTAs to fund key positions because it's not sustainable. You might not fundraise as much one year. You might change your priority. And then again, that's a position that's out. So we are with you. We're on track.
Oh, thank you,
We
Scott.
haven't finished it up yet.
I mean, and to build on that even, like two years ago, we did compare PTA budgets across site, and some of it is pretty drastically different, where some schools are fundraising 3 times what other schools are fundraising. And what does that turn into, and what does that look like? Right. So, it is very real concerns, right?
I see real quick, but just
yeah.
really quickly, one thing that we are hoping to do by the end of this week is to go back to the principals. Again, there was a number of positions. They had to make a budget A and a budget B. There were a number of positions they were considering where they get funded. We're going to be able to go back to them and discuss which ones are we for sure going to be able to fund. So the coaches, et cetera. And I think that will help alleviate some of the ask that you might be getting. So I just wanted to let you know that. And I had something else to tell you, but I just totally forgot what it was. If I remember, I'll come back to it.
Can I just quickly, because I think this is on your agenda or on the agenda, but the PTAs have been asked to send our SSC checks to the district by May 1st. And my understanding is that like nothing's going to be finalized by May 1st. And so that's like, how are we, May 1st is earlier than we've ever had to send an SSC check. It's usually July 1st. So I'm really confused at how the PTA is going to be expected to send our SSC check when I mean, yeah, I would like some clarity on that as well.
That one's not on the agenda, Emily, but Yasmina's writing it down, and I will get the answer. I don't know why you were asked to submit it, particularly if it was earlier than usual, but I'll get the information and I'll send it either to you directly.
The principals all received an email from Harvey Young today in the district office saying that that SSC checks must be received by May 1st this year.
I'll get that information for you and follow up.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Harpreet.
Hey, thank you so much for this, Superintendent. I was just wondering this is like brand new, some of it is brand new information for me. I'm a kindergarten parent from Oxford. I just wanted to let you know, like hearing like the rational side of it, it does not take away from the cruelty and inhumanity of these pink slips. So, and particularly when we are living in this landscape today, where we are seeing like lots and lots of federal workers being, dismissed. So I was hoping that Berkeley would do a little better. So I just wanted to say, I understand the laws, the rules, and everything, but I still wanted to emphasize that we need to do better than having this process. And when we say we, I realize that this is California, but this just does not make it better. And I wanted to give you a real life example of how things sort of lead to people worrying more than they should. So in this very meeting, when it started, it was said that, one of the ways of uh, getting more funds or thinking about how to manage fund deficit is consolidating the schools. And one of the schools they're thinking of is Oxford. I'm an Oxford parent. So when I'm in a meeting where you are also their superintendent, and it is being said that they're thinking of eliminating Oxford by consolidating, whatever that is supposed to mean. And then how am I supposed to think that, oh, this is just an idea which might or might not happen when my child is in kindergarten and there are 5 more years that I have to think about. So I would caution that when you use information like this or float ideas like this, because transparency is one of the mottos of BUSD, either tell us that if you're thinking of merging Oxford with something, tell us what the timeline is. And if this is just an idea, please do not say that this is the particular school you are thinking about closing, because for parents who have so much to think about as such, thinking that your school is going to be closed is a bit too much. Third thing, I wanted to give an idea. I had a suggestion for, I was thinking there are lots of positions that BUSD has. Perhaps one position that we can all fundraise for or somehow have an alumni fundraise for could be a development or a fundraiser for the BUSD. Who can fundraise, who can have a unit and they can fundraise. Perhaps they can have a target of $2 or $3 million a year. There are development teams across big bureaucratic units. So BUSD should actually fund a development manager. Perhaps you can ask PTAs to fund a part of it as a pilot for the first 1 or 2 years. And this would take the burden away from PTAs as well. And this would be a centralized BUSD thing. And if you're raising that money, and then you can use that for many other things, because most of the fundraising is unrestricted. So Superintendent, you would have this in your bag and you could use it for many other things that perhaps the regular budget has restrictions on. Thank you.
Thank you, Harpreet. And Yasmina wrote down all of your ideas. I do appreciate your bringing back the human piece of it. My sharing the timelines and the legalities of it all was not at all to minimize the impact. Again, I've been in education for 20-something years, and I promise you that I directly know what it feels like, both as a teacher getting a March 15th notice, but also as a leader. We're always the first ones that get cut. So I know every March 15th on my birthday, one of my gifts is the possibility that I will not have my same role. So I appreciate you, but I want you to hear from me as a person that I know exactly what it feels like. And it's never my intent to cut anybody, right? Or to reduce anyone without reason, in this way. And I still believe that it is the most respectful thing to do, as I, again, have folks who lose their jobs in 2 weeks. We're trying our best to rescind as quickly as possible, but being really honest as possible. In terms of that Oxford closure, I think you might have heard me comment that some folks take a slide and then run with it. And that was what that comment was about. It's really important, and it's hard for me as I'm in meetings or putting things on slides, if anyone takes a snippet from anything, right, and then runs with it. So my hope is that folks stay for the entirety of the meeting or listen to the whole thing. It was our attempt to be responsive to our SBAC group, to let them see their ideas reflected. And you're right. And we got that feedback and recognized that we actually could have just not put the school's name and just put, it was a suggestion to consolidate an elementary. So I hear that feedback and I receive it. And we've since, if you notice on my recent slide, it didn't say the name of the school. It just said elementary school, because that feedback was really well received. And I apologize for the ways in which it caused any extra or unnecessary anxiety on the part of you or any other families at Oxford. It really was, as the slide said, even when it did say Oxford, an idea that was shared from the community that we were going to come back with data on. And I like the idea of the developer. Thank you very much. We wrote that one down.
Thank you.
This is your meeting, Rita. Do you want me to call Hollis again, or what?
Oh my gosh. Well, we also, I know, so the chat kind of got away from me here. I'm not sure how much of the conversation within the chat is stuff that we want to talk about out loud now. I also recognize, Superintendent, that you have been in meetings for a very long time, with the other meeting before this one tonight. So okay, Hollis, why don't you go, and then maybe if I know Lindsay,
really quick.
Too.
One thing in the chat I put in for the people who haven't been here, when I was treasurer in 2021, that's when we looked at the first time all of the budgets across. So in there, there's a Tableau file, looked at our budget across. You can see how much money we were bringing in like 4 or 5 years ago. The second thing, when I was president at Thousand Oaks, one thing that we focused on was it's really hard when PTAs fund position. So that Rosa Parks president, I do feel you. It's hard to do that. What we did in our office and in our site was not to fund specific things, but we gave a block grant funding similar to like your Medi-Cal grant funding is to the states. And we told the principal, we're going to fundraise this amount for you, and you decide how you want to distribute those funds. And that way, the structure for us was the amount that we would contribute from our membership was set, and we had a target, but the positions and the carryovers and everything else will let that be the principal's decision. So one thing to think about is not funding individual positions, but giving a firm amount to your principal and have them make that decisions. But you can fundraise on a target set amount that would make things a little bit easier for you. And we front load it the next year. So in 1 year we paid twice to meet that cutoff, right? To make sure that the next PTA didn't have to worry about that was in that same year. So some things think about how you structure your funding, how you do your budgeting, and really work hand in hand with your principal to make sure that you're not burdened with that decision. That's a site decision. Your burden is making sure there's funding available and there's fun events for your family, but PTA funding positions, that should not be. So that's something we can talk offline about later, figure out how we did it, and glad to give you some feedback and wish you the best of luck with your budget moving forward.
Well, Hollis, also, maybe that's something that we as PTA Council could be spreading around as a potential option for schools, because that sounds that there's a lot of benefit to doing things that way.
Okay, Rita, real quick, ready? So there were some questions about facilities. And so I'm not gonna spend a long time. It was like, we need more than just the board meetings to know about facilities. So I just want you to know that we, over the last 2 years have really been focusing on communication, and the board meeting is not and should not be the only place that you get updates. We've had community meetings in person and engagement sessions. I think about Sylvia Mendez and Longfellow in particular right now. We also have met with small groups of families. We've had a couple webinars. We ask our leaders to put information about whatever projects or construction in their school newsletters. I send letters out to respective communities as well. And then we've also been updating our district web pages. So I want to make sure you know that the board meeting is not the only place for you to get information regarding facilities and work that's happening. Again, we have a facilities webpage that has a lot of information on it, including recordings from previous engagements, for example, as well as information about some of the projects that are happening and some work that's happening with our bonds. So I want you to know that that webpage is accessible and has quite a bit of information, and we're continuously adding information to that webpage. If you are curious about workforce housing in particular, there is a website specifically for that, and that website link is here. It gives you updates, it gives you information about engagements, et cetera. And I'm not saying that any of this is enough, but I do want you all to know that our effort is to engage and to share information as much as possible, trying to think about different modalities to do that in. Also specific to Longfellow, another place to get information is the 2x2. I talked about 2x2 for after school, but another agenda item for the 2x2, actually at this very last 2x2 meeting last week, was Longfellow and the middle school traffic safety. And that was a specific ask on one of the questions. And so I did link for you all, or for folks who are caring about Longfellow's traffic with the workforce housing, the recording of that part of the agenda. So you actually can hear the city talk about what it has been doing and what it's considering. And hopefully you'll also hear there's been a lot of collaboration between BUSD and the city with regard to the workforce housing and all of its implications with safety. I'm also going to put something in the newsletter for Longfellow to make sure the entire community gets that update as well. And just for folks who care, I see Lindsay in the room and some other folks. This is kind of the high level summary of what came out of the meeting. The city is refreshing some of the striping, or has refreshed some of the striping. I see I have a typo, but I'll fix that. They are ultimately, the big takeaway is that they approved moving the rolling drop off to Curtis in front of the new bus stop and eliminating Virginia drop off altogether, which was a big concern and a big push from Longfellow families. I did see a comment that said that there's families who had ideas and no one was engaging with them. I want to correct that as well. Our director, Jennifer Shanoski, was meeting personally with these families from Longfellow who had ideas. I took those ideas and gave those ideas to the 2x2, and those ideas have manifested not only in collaboration, but the elimination of Virginia drop-off. And we hope to continue to get collaboration and proposals to improve and make sure that when we do start workforce housing, when the groundbreaking happens, which is now, we're figuring out the new date, we will do it in ways that really make sure that student safety and staff safety is at the forefront. The next couple of slides, Rita, are just information for the folks in this room. We have another SBAC meeting coming up on Wednesday. Our Board of Education meeting is coming up on the 9th of April. And then also we need some members for our district safety committee. If you're interested in the new curriculum, I know there's some curriculum questions. We are showing it for public review at our 2020 Bonar district office, and the dates are there. You could also see it from the comforts of your own home by clicking on that link if you're interested in that, in the K5 ELA curriculum. And then, oh, that was saying that was coming here. No, yep, and I'm here already, so I don't have to tell you all that. And that was it. That was all the slides. I tried to put stuff in there that's in response to most of those questions, Ms. Rita, but if there's any that folks did not get answered, I can always circle back and give the information to you. And I see Lindsay.
So I appreciate that quick run through and everything. And I know that the PAC committee has recommendations about the BUSD website, and actually the last meeting at our PTA council, we actually like pushed a little bit hard on Jen Chinoski when
Oh yes,
because
the Longfellow.
Because the thing is that the current website does not meet current standards of usability. If you search something into the search field, you will get results from 2012, 2010, 2008. Sometimes it will be a nice little message from Don Evans to staff.
Wow.
You know, you'll be like, wow, I just wanted the curriculum page or the facilities page, but now here I am in the depths of the internet. So when you say that things are easy to find, I would just respectfully push back on that. Because no, it is not. I never know where to find the 2x2 page. I have to click at least 5 times. I never know where to find the Jill Hogendijk section.
Wait a minute.
Where is it?
I'm just trying to make sure that I say easy, because I don't think I ever said easy.
It is
in Berkeley.
not. Okay, maybe you'd never said easy. But you said it was possible to find, and somebody has to be incredibly dedicated to find this stuff.
Okay, Lindsay, let me tell you how I do it. Now, I don't know how you do it. But
I want to know.
This is all I ever use is that search thing, okay? Now, let's see. It probably going to embarrass me now. Let's see. So for SBAC, I just push in SBAC, and then what you're saying is that this is too much, because then I just go here. But you're saying that's too much stuff on SBAC. Some of it's old.
Well, why is the archive your first thing? Or like when you look, if you go for like Longfellow construction, search Longfellow construction.
Okay.
Just for funsies. Just
for fun, and then you could talk later. I don't want you.
That's fine, but I'm just saying that, like, if you think about a good website as customer engagement.
Did I type it in right? I did it wrong. Sorry.
I can't see your screen, but if you think about a good website as customer engagement and family engagement,
I hear you.
It can be really important to have a functional, working, well-designed website. And
I disagree. I just want to make sure I didn't say easy, because ain't nothing about that website. Jasmine will tell you it's too wordy. It's a whole bunch of reasons why it's not easy to me. So I'll make sure I didn't say it. But I wanted to like look and see what you were experiencing, and I definitely see what you mean. One, everything's in list form, but also it's the order, the sequence of what arrives, what shows up. It doesn't make sense. I got you, Lindsay. It's called.
Thank you. I know it.
So don't play with me. You can come help out.
I will give you some advice, but not for free. I'm kidding.
I have any more consultants now? You know, we're trying to do reductions. Anyway, appreciate you all. I know there's some more questions in the chat. Maybe Rita, you can download the chat and send them to me. These are not fun times. These are not easy times, y'all, but I promise you, we are making some really hard decisions, truly in collaboration and with those values that I showed you on the screen in mind, and nothing is final. at this point. And as soon as we can move folks off the list, we will. And as soon as we can get closer to final, we will come back and give you all an update as well. And the other thing is that our board president did ask that we make public presentations at the board meeting. So specifically about some of these positions and the things that the SBAC is talking about, there'll be other opportunities for you to see and hear the conversation in ways that have not happened in the past.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. I can't believe the amount of information we got through. That was amazing. Yeah, Di and I will try and figure out how to download the questions from the chat. Although I think we actually covered most of them. There might have been a couple here and there, and we'll check in a few minutes here and just see.
I downloaded them too.
Oh, well then you
just to follow Lindsay's conversation.
Infiltrated. No, yes, she's here to take notes. And so maybe you all do your own download because we're going to log off and there might be some after that. But I do appreciate all y'all's time and volunteer and service to the babies and for the push for us to think about how we do this work and how we can do it better.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh my gosh, y'all, does anyone else feel like they need a nap? Oh.
I know we have just respecting everyone's time. We have 12 minutes. And, you know, one of the things I do want to take this opportunity out if people do still have this brain power for, we wanted to kind of debrief and figure out next steps of advocacy. I think that came out of a lot of the email requests that came through these last couple of weeks. How can we as a PTA, how can we as a PTA council across board support, I don't know, this process to support a change, or if we can, after all that was told to us tonight. Thoughts?
I think it always comes back. Oh, sorry, Emily. I didn't mean to take your thunder. Please go first.
No, it's totally fine. I just really quickly, I mean, this was super helpful and it was so much information. And I think that the average parent just like, I mean, it's going to take me a little while to digest everything, but the average parent like is not understanding this. And so like, I think I said on the listserv, like at Rosa Parks, we have a big sign that up in front of our school that just lists all the pink slipped people by name, right? Like staff. So the average parent is just seeing that and is like, oh my gosh, these are the people that are going to get laid off. And even though I've been trying to have individual conversations and directing them to places like this, most people don't have time. Most people are, it would be, I don't know if we can get this together, but like, I wish there was like a one pager, right? Like that we could like have, that like a typical parent who's just going to read something for like you're just going to glance at something for 1 second could understand why, like, yes, we need to advocate and these are not great times, but we also don't need to go into like dire, like just sort of extreme crisis mode.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's like what I'm struggling with right now.
Like we should almost check in with whoever does our newsletter and say, let's put something together now for, you know, if it's March 15th every year for next year, the Thursday before, maybe even 2 Thursdays before, to get it out into those newsletters for a couple of weeks that this is what this means. You know, and so it's hitting people right before it happens instead of right after.
Lindsay, go for it. I think your hand's up.
So I think, Rita, that's a great job, a great idea. And I actually think it's the job of the district. We can disseminate this, but they need to make it because this is a marketing and a communication issue at the essential base of it. They have decided to have their communications person also be their public information person, responding to, you know, requests for, you know, the FAFSA requests and everything.
Yeah.
So then that person therefore can't do a good job like making a communication strategy or developing like material to support these, you know, annual flare points. And this is the job of the district. If they can make a slide deck understanding the budget and keep on pressing people to that webpage, there's no reason why they can't make a 1-pager on pink slips and
I
then
think that's a
provide it to
reasonable ask.
PTAs. It's a
I think that,
reasonable ask.
yeah, I think
And
it's a
so
reasonable
is
ask.
having a strategy after 3 years. And if you have a strategy for the direction of the school district, then suddenly you don't have to pink slip 300 people because you have a tighter idea of what's going to happen. So that's my other point, is that there's some really basic underpinnings that we're missing here that, like, I think we could have avoided some of the stress in this situation by having, like, you know, a strategy to point back to. Where at joint meetings, they were still workshopping their strategy with the joint committee meeting like last month or whatever. So that's my perspective as, you know, my own business person and my own like project planning and strategic development of my own projects. I would never want to undertake a task like this without a strategy. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've got Mandisa and then Hollis.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say that this is going to be hard on everyone. And if we could just, as community, hold space for the people that are going to be impacted the hardest. And so we understand that in the bureaucracy of school districts, in the bureaucracy of government, that the people that make the most are not going to feel the impact, but the people that make the least and do the most and that are intrinsically connected with our children on a day in and day out basis, those are the people that are going to feel the impact. Now, I suggested a very unpopular suggestion for the budget balancing, and that's to cut some of the salaries of the most highest paid people in the school district. But of course, that's not going to be a consideration.
I just want to say, for lack of words, I want to shit on anyone in this positions to figure out what to do in these situations, right? The way our schools are funded is not equitable, right? A lot of it's based on property values and different things. And we as Berkeley community has, through BSEP, have funded, different things to make our schools better. I think overall, as much as this collaborative come together, it doesn't help to finger point what people can and should and where they're faltering on what they're doing. I think our job is to lift up and say, how can we help? Right. So, I like the idea if we're talking about Rita, what can we do? Because if people transition to new positions, it's going to be a whole new BTA president. It's going to be a whole new BTA secretary. What we can do is amortize, take some of this information, this presentation, say, hey, for the next year, this is what you need to be focused on. We have this problem every time. I've been on BPTA for like a number of years. And as people move, how do we keep the momentum and the knowledge of what we learned? Because people get burned out, right? People are like, this is really a lot of work, right? And for the new people who don't know the process of government, who don't know laws that have to be followed in terms of WARN notices or even pink slip notices, it is quite jarring. So I think part of our role is how do we make sure that people understand what the process is, how to advocate, to whom to advocate, and where to move and how to move. Right. So, the presentation that she gave us, I think we can take, and I'll take a stab at creating here some base, PowerPoints that we need to go for the new president. Here's what you need to think about telling your constituents, telling your membership what's going to happen. It's our job to educate our parents, right? It's our job to have parent education say, do we know what the budget is? How does it work internally and with the school district? And so they were all more knowledgeable what the process is and know where and how to advocate for. I'm not in those positions, to be a superintendent, to be the funding officers, to be the PIOs. Those are tough positions to fill when money isn't plentiful. But I think our job is not to point fingers about what they're not doing. I think our job should be what can we do to lift it up to make our parents feel understanding what's happening and give them a place to put their energy and efforts. So I'm going to take the PowerPoint she put in, try to work something and say, here, can we put it in our archives? Is this something useful to move forward? Because if no one here is stepping up to be president or vice president, what can we do for the next person? Say, here's some knowledge we can give forth to you to make sure that you'll have a better landing next year and the year beyond. So it won't be oh my God, what happened? Here's the lessons we've learned.
Yeah, because I mean, just to build on that, I mean, please, everyone, go back to your PTAs and talk about this at your next leadership meeting. Let's not end up in a situation where our communities, even at that level, aren't following along on this. So that's step one, is that all the people on all the PTAs in Berkeley now start to understand that this is what this process looks like. It sucks. I mean, I'm not saying I like the process. I think we just all need to start from a basis of understanding it. Helpreet and then Vicky.
I think one of the things that I'm getting out of it, and I would like to think that I'm in a learning phase because, as I mentioned, I'm a kindergarten parent. I think what is striking for me and frustrating, would be frustrating in the coming years is I understand this happens every year. I have a much better understanding. I understood it before too, that what are the various words and acronyms and all. The thing is, nothing is certain. So when this happens next year, it's not that I will sit in peace and be like, oh, I now know that this just has to happen because of a law. I can just sit if all our learns coordinators have gotten the pink slip, counselors have gotten the pink slip. I should just sit back and relax, knowing that this is something that they just have to do, and ultimately it will not happen. Because the thing is, we cannot be sure that on May 15th, who are the people who will be let go and who are the people that they can keep, and how those decisions are taken. Because though BUSD talks about transparency, like any big bureaucracy, it is as opaque as it gets. And this is not because of a person, this is just the nature of the bureaucracy. So I think that's the main reason, because we cannot sit idle. That's why we at Oxford have a petition going for our Learns coordinator. And also there are a number of other factors too. It's not just about information or lack of information for parents. The other thing is that even if they were to rescind most of it, what happens? I'm just talking about the aftercare program. What if they're talking about restructuring that program where one coordinator would now might be assigned to multiple sites? So that's a big thing now. So that's something that we have to get ahead of. So I'm just saying there's so many balls in the air, and that's why, and coupled with what is going on in the country, it's really, really complex. And I don't think it's about like how much more information me as a parent can take and understand. And then it's just that I just don't believe that it's time that when it happens next year, I can sit in peace. That is
I
not
don't
going to happen.
I don't want to make it sound like that's what I think is parents should be doing. I just think that instead of having to first understand this and then see how this fits together, that at least again, there's sort of a foundational understanding of what the process is. And again, maybe not for all parents, but at least for all PTA members at the different schools. And then, there is a working group specifically around after school that meets, I believe, is it once or twice a month? Scott, I see you're on here. You might have the contact for that.
It's once a month. It's once a month. Sorry.
Yeah, with Yusuf, and he who is the person who took over coordinating that, at least as an interim. So there's that as another resource as well. Which again, well, having more information is not always the easiest thing, but it is another resource. Vicky, you're up.
Yeah, I have a couple of follow-up comments from various different things that I've heard. I'll start backwards. So like the Learns coordinator, for example, I talked to the Learns coordinator at Malcolm X, and she actually did not get a pink slip because she's not officially a coordinator. So she does the job of a Learns coordinator, but she gets the salary of a specialist. And in the last 2 years, they created a different position that didn't used to exist, that is now part of a different union that can manage people. And so not all schools have coordinators at that level. I mean, so there's always things behind the scenes that we don't know about unless we dig in to it. because not all schools have coordinators, and the coordinators are now management positions. And when you talk about, oh, the people who get more, she's doing the same job as other people at other schools, and they're making almost twice as much as she's making doing that same work, but she's not part of the managers union, as an example. Another example for at the SSC at Berkeley High, all vice principals in the entire district receive pink slips. So those are administrators. And, you know, Malcolm X is the only middle or elementary school that has a vice principal. But like, that's something that we're like, hey, should we fundraise around this? And we're twice the size of other schools in the district. So we feel like it's important that we have that position. But again, it's very likely that that could get cut. So I see the need for wanting to do that, but there's no way they're going to cut, you know, all of the vice principals at Berkeley High. There's 3,000 students. You can't cut every position. And those are things that are like reallocated. So the vice principal who's in charge of SSC, he's like, I might be reassigned to replace a teacher, and I might be in the classroom and not a vice principal and not an administrator. So that is going to affect a lot of different things. I mean, so there are lots of moving balls, and I agree that this is like traumatic for people. And this vice principal, for example, that I love, the whole reason he's in this district is 4 years ago he got a pink slip at his district somewhere else, and they offered him his job back, and he already accepted a position at BUSD, and something like that could happen again. So I feel like as parents, we have to hold two things in our hands: this idea that we might lose really good people, but there's hard decisions we have to make when we're looking at $8 million worth of cuts, and the district needs the flexibility to figure that out. And so, for example, like with OFI, every OFI person got a pink slip, but maybe they're going to cut everyone from from a full-time FTE to 0.8, right? And then everyone gets to keep their OFI, but they're not all full-time anymore, rather than, you know, getting rid of one person. Like, we don't know what those creative solutions are. So the more ideas that we can come up with versus spending our time trying to like say, no, keep this person I love or keep this person I love, like come up with solutions on how to fill the needs that we have. Like, one of the proposals was to create jobs that have both IAs and aftercare, because that becomes a full position that's higher benefits and fills the 23 openings we have in Learns. And we have over 150 waiting list students at our site who can't be in Learns because we can't hire enough people. So what are the creative things that we can do to sort of solve some of these things? You know, and so I mean, yes, it's just really tough. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is, Emily, like, who posted the pink slip list at your site? Like, take it down. I feel like it's
Well, I assume it was the union. I mean, I assume it
uh
was the union. Like, we can't take
yeah.
it, like, it wasn't a parent. I
Yeah.
believe it was the union. We can't.
You know, I mean,
it's up to the principal to take it down if she wants
yeah.
to take it down. But if it was the union, like, we're not gonna. No
Yeah,
one's gonna
and
take that
that's the
down.
thing.
Yeah.
Like, we all have staff that we love, and everyone is scared. And they're going to their parents and saying, hey, help me fight for this position. You know how important this is. Like, I have a relationship with my OFI person, and she happens to have seniority. So unless they cut all of them, like, she's not going away. But I have friends who work in that position that are lower and might get cut, right? But it's like, is that realistic that they're going to get cut? Again, you can't cut every counselor in the district, right? But we have to cut something because we have that shortfall. And one of the things that we're doing at SBAC is we're saying, let's look at these contracts. Why do we have IAs making twice as much as contractors? Why do we have contracts with RT Fisher and doing after school programs that cost way more than internal programs? So we're trying to look at those things that are opaque and say, let's look at these contractors, let's look at these outside people, let's look at these vendors before we start doing our inside people. But you have to come to the table with those ideas, And so please, if you guys have ideas, send them my way and I'll bring them forth as we continue these discussions.
Thank you so much, Vicki. And Kiki, you're up next.
Thank you. I actually had lowered my hand because Vicky actually touched on some of the points I was gonna make, but excuse me. I just wanted to piggyback on the fact that we should start to be a little more creative in terms of our advocacy for the importance of a lot of these support positions, because to Mandisa, and I apologize if I mispronounced it, Mandisa's point, to Vicky's point, it seems when Miss Enikia said that it was by position, that it is the lowest hanging fruit. And the lowest hanging fruit is actually some of the most important people to our students and to our community in terms of the support that they give the administration as well as the teachers. And we at Oxford, like Harpreet mentioned, did a petition for Aaron because over the last couple of years, he's been subjected to several things that are outside of just a normal pink slip process. And so we hold him near and dear, but we're just as empathetic to all the aftercare directors, and as well as I have an older child at Willard. And so I'm speaking to the PTA president there, as well as Miss Kimberly, and people are really scared that their seniority is not enough, because what we've learned in the aftercare space is that it's not just your seniority in aftercare, it's actually your seniority with the district. So you could have someone that has 20 years at the district and they were in a lower position, and rightfully so, work their way up to a higher job title, whereas someone was in that position all along 8 years or something like that, and they feel that they're gonna get cut. And so I think the bigger issue is, how do we come to Vicky's point, which is why I lowered my hand, how do we come up with creative solutions that help fill in the gaps, help think for administration in terms of the holes that we see. I'm actually on the extended care learning collaborative call with Yusuf. I'm not able to make it every single call, but I'm on pretty regularly with Soy and a lot of the members here. And I'm going to bring Harpreet on that call, because I think one of the things is we were under the impression that they were interviewing and different things that they were doing to actually, which I believe that they're doing, to actually fill these holes. And then we're being told that there's not money for current staff. And so we're putting all of us, a lot of familiar faces on this call. We're on multiple groups and multiple committees that cross collaborate. However, it's not syncing up. We're, like I said, to the point of using the aftercare as an example. We're on that call discussing wait list and discussing bandwidth and discussing supplementing extended learning and all those things and hiring. And then we find out 2 weeks later that current staff is being pink slipped. And so we just want to make sure that our time and our efforts are well spent and that they're making impact and moving the needle. So that was it. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much for being on that committee as well. I mean, I know that's another big chunk of time, but that's very much appreciated.
Thank you all as well. Thank you.
Hey, Rita, I'd like to call time. Appreciate everyone staying 9 minutes over.
We've got one more hand up.
Okay.
Sorry, my one is, and I missed part of this meeting because my kids had meltdowns, but we talk a lot about cuts and I get all these questions, but I don't hear a lot of talks about why we're losing kids, why our enrollment keeps going down. And I think there needs to be more talks about how we can become more attractive again, and how can we keep people. I'm glad it's going up, Lindsay, but I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of people that are not feeling a lot of confidence in BSD. So I think that's another piece that we need to, it might be a state thing, but we can't talk about that. I can't fix the state. Let's talk about Berkeley and how we can regain some more faith in our school system in Berkeley. Like, I can't, we can't do all of California, but we have really smart, passionate people here, and why aren't we keeping them? So, like, I think that needs to be put in the mix too, because when you get better numbers, you get more funding. It does start. It solves that on another little piece of the pie, and I think that gets kind of not talked about.
It's true. I mean, it's a good point to make. It's also helpful to keep in mind that, again, like, you know, we think about how Berkeley is unique here too, in that we do have we have BSEP funding that comes in to support a very large chunk of our budget. So tonight we were talking about the general fund, but BSEP funds are what keeps our classroom sizes low and pays for our music programming and a lot of other supports that, you know, other school districts do not have. And so, you know, these are hard times. And if you look at the cuts being made at other school districts that are comparable in size, we're in a better place than they are, at least. I mean, I know that's not good. Still, it's not good, but you know,
Right.
there's a lot of things not good right now.
Yeah.
I'm grasping at straws here. Folks, I appreciate how late everyone has stayed on tonight, and I see more flurries of chats going, and I cannot keep up with them. And I also recognize you all probably have kids to get to bed. We do have Chris Albeck coming next time. I doubt he's going to want to stay on quite as long as our superintendent did tonight, although you never know. But so we'll have more time at the end to talk then as well. The questions about the May 15th, the email from Henry, I can't remember his last name. Young, thank you. We will send out and we'll try and follow up with more information as we get it. So, I mean, I know that's not again, you guys stop putting things in the chat. I can't keep up, man.
Rita, just because I see that I'm still off mute, I think really quickly, I think the biggest one, and we'll discuss internally at Oxford, is the deadline for the check. And so I think that's something that is really kind of hanging over all of us. How can we issue a check when we haven't navigated our funds? And so that would probably be one that we all can circle back to. I'm not able to keep up with them either, but I did see that one popped up, and it's real pertinent because it's very time sensitive and we're not there yet. And so how can the deadline move? So that's maybe something we can consider. I also have to jump off. I appreciate you guys.
Okay.
You all.
And Hollis, seriously,
Thank
like
you.
I like that block grant idea. Maybe we could have a conversation at the beginning of the school year about changing the way we all think about funding, you know, for our schools.
Yeah, it
So that is
eliminate a lot of just like back and forth and like asking for, oh, we need an extra 3% because of position. It was do this, here you go. And then we had to make the decision to front load because when we approve our budgets and when Berkeley wants their money, we're like, this is getting kind of crazy. So we advanced that money in the next year. So we're like, all right, so now we're on top of it. So this year is paying for next year, which is kind of not great because not supposed to do that. But to get rid of that issue, we're like, here you go.
God, the number of things that Berkeley PTAs are not supposed to do and we do anyway. Let's just add that to the list.
Yeah.
All for the greater good.
Well, I pledge to end our meetings, folks, saying thank you to all of you, all your effort. My goodness, everyone here. Bless you, all the different committees, all the hours. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.